Tour guides of Reddit. What's the worst thing a tourist has ever done under your supervision? Led a scuba diving tour. While signing the safety waivers and all that, one very old man kept telling us that he had a DNR, do not resuscitate. We plainly told him that we are not bound to a DNR, and if he passed out for any reason we would attempt to resuscitate by our safety training. Pretty much all the divers are assuming this guy is gonna kill himself down there, probs spit out the reg and go quietly into the night. Dive happens, pretty much everyone is hawk-eyed on this guy. I see him go behind a large coral head and lay down in the sand and spit out his reg. He is only at about 60 feet, so I grab him and wrestle him to the surface. He will not take my backup regulator, so I slam it against his mouth and purge air into his face. We get to the surface and he is fighting me non-stop, trying to pull all of his gear off. I throw a very hard punch to his jaw and knock him out, actually trained to do this during dive rescues to keep the panicked person from killing you too. 3 weeks later and he tries to sue my dive shop and myself personally. TLDR, guy tried to kill himself. What the heck, drown yourself on your own time. About 15 years ago, I worked as a deckhand on a line of boats that took people out to Fort Sumter. The trip was about an hour each way. One day, we were about halfway there and two teenagers decided it would be fun to jump off and try to swim to shore. This is in Charleston Harbor, which has a pretty solid tidal current, lots of boat traffic, and probably more sharks than one would like to think about. We ended up having to perform a water rescue on them. Then continued on to the fort, with the Coast Guard coming and picking them up. All in all, an extreme act of stupidity. I used to do vineyard and garden tours for a pretty well-known winery. I had a lady ask to see any Merlot vines we had, so I walked her over and she proceeded to dump ash all over them and yell, "We love you, Nana." Rest in peace. Needless to say, you are not allowed to dump human remains on food goods. I should mention the ashes came out of a gallon Ziploc baggie. It was a Christmas-themed one, so maybe that makes it more tasteful. I'm a bush pilot in Alaska and occasionally do glacier air tours. If my boss asks, I'm not a fan of doing tours. One day I'm doing a glacier tour and had probably 7 people on board, and the dude sitting next to just looks at me and says, "I'm the captain now," and yanks the plane 30 degrees to the right and then lets go and laughs, saying he was just kidding. There was yelling to follow via my mouth. Loki, you're a child of God for not just knocking him out the second you landed safely. Used to be a tour guide at a primate sanctuary with a strict no-touching policy. At the end of the tour there's a suspension bridge. Tourists go first, guide goes last as per the rules. I always warn the tourists that the other side is the territory of a Hanuman langur and he doesn't fuck around, keep your distance, etc. He doesn't attack people out of nowhere, but he likes showing his teeth and screaming, which scares tourists. Anyway, one tour I get to the other side of the bridge, and a tourist got bitten. He says a monkey just bit him out of nowhere. Ask the other tourists, no, he tried to fucking pet the Hanuman. Dumb butt got what he deserved. I like to imagine he looked like this. Was on a tour in New Orleans. Guy gets drunk and basically makes a fool of himself and slaps his partner. Everyone else on the tour is like, whoa, not cool, take a hike. GF leaves with him. Next morning we're all on the bus waiting to roll out to the next destination and we're not moving. 30 minutes later we're all getting pissed off, then the couple get on the bus looking sheepish. By the next stop we learn the drunk guy ran a bath at the hotel, passed out and it flooded the bathroom and 4 floors below into the hotel lobby. The hotel wouldn't let him leave without paying thousands of dollars. Karma for him. On an open-top tour bus in London, woman tries to dangle her toddler over the railing, then starts saying she's going to complain to my manager when I told her to stop. Caught her doing it again, and company policy said that anyone endangering the kids like that was to be removed from the tour, so the driver had to come up and march her off. She still insisted she did nothing wrong. Like, she literally had the kid's feet on the side rail of the moving bus and was just holding him loosely round the waist. One low-hanging tree branch, of which there were many on the route, and that kid was gone. Worked at an aquarium, this dude arrived in the Amazon exhibit room featuring the tank where every fish in it can hurt you, and promptly started dangling his sister's kid over the exhibit. I immediately stepped up to him and pushed the kid back from over it, firmly explaining that this wasn't allowed and that I'd have to call security. Thank God, the kid's mother was on my side and started tearing into the man. It took her 5 minutes of "no, that was absolutely not appropriate" for him to get the message that he'd seriously fucked up. Some people never do get the whole pointy venomous fish bad, no dangling kids thing. Not a tour guide, but was doing an English language camp for foreign kids. Took the kids on a day trip to London, which involved going up the London Eye. While in the queue, one of the kids started shouting that he had a bomb in his bag and he was going to blow everyone up. Almost got all 20 kids in the group kicked out. Somewhat relevant, there's a small hill on a pedestrian footpath outside my university. Once, I witnessed a Segway tour attempt to use this path. The first Segway slowed to a stop as it reached the top of this hill. The second Segway sped up in an attempt to make it over and crashed into the first Segway. One by one, each Segway crashed into the one in front of it, toppling over each other. The pathway now has a "No Bikes or Segways" sign. I was working on a tourist island in Australia when this man pulled out almost all the back feathers of a peacock because he wanted to keep one. He sneaked up behind it and grabbed a huge handful and yanked them all out. He was immediately escorted off the island. The peacock had a huge bare patch and most of its beautiful feathers were gone. I have never seen peacock enclosures that didn't have feathers on the ground. So it's doubly bad because if the guy had just been observant he probably could have gotten feathers without harming any of the birds. The peacock dropped feathers around the place all the time. We had a couple of them in our store. He didn't ask anyone if they had any, he just tried to grab one off the actual bird. We were all really upset for a while after. I used to work at a heritage site. It was an old military installation with a lot of remaining original structures, bunk beds, cafeteria equipment, computers, etc. Every day it was a constant effort to remind people, read kids, not to jump on the beds, not to slam doors open, not to punch every button like it owes them money. The absolute worst was a group of kids on a school trip. Within the first 10 minutes we're walking through the tech portion of the exhibit, where we had a wall lined with Burroughs large systems machines, B5000s, all behind this little fence about waist high. I turned to demonstrate some of the pieces, and when I look back at the group, one of them had jumped over the barrier, opened one of the units and started pulling out handfuls of digital tape from the reels inside. I just about jumped on the kid when the teacher did just that. She jumped the barrier, smacked the kid's hands and took him outside. I immediately ended the tour and had them all refunded, as I couldn't imagine what else could happen. Awfully nice of you to refund them after that. It was my supervisor's decision, but honestly, after only 10 minutes of a tour, plus they had to take a bus all the way out there, I didn't care so much. They took a big shit in front of the group. So, we tore through streets and parks and make it really clear that the toilets at the beginning of the tour are the only ones for the first 90 minutes of tour. We get to a park about 30 minutes into the tour. Not a big park, mind you, it is basically a big roundabout with a swing set, bench and 2 trees. I'm in the middle of my spiel in the park when I see a guy at the back of the group step away, pull his pants down and squat on the grass. Of course I was stunned and lost my flow, which had everyone looking around only to recoil in horror as this guy drops a log like it was nothing. He wasn't even ashamed. I work at a brewery taproom and take people on brewery tours. During fermentation, CO2 is produced and excess comes out through a runoff pipe and into a water bucket. One of the attendees, who was being a pain and trying to be funny but nobody was laughing, asked me what the pipe was for, so I gladly explained. He then asked what would happen if he breathed it in. In disbelief of his stupidity, I told him he would pass out, damage his brain. He then proceeded to grab the pipe and take a breath. He was then ejected and barred. Some people are just beyond belief. Took a class of middle schoolers to a museum and one of my arsehole students dragged his hand across a 3,000-year-old Indian painting. Later on I found out the object was almost certainly a reproduction, but I nearly died of rage on the spot. Edit: the student was with us on a 45-day placement for severe behavioral issues. He earned enough point in school to qualify for the field trip. Never again. Thank everything that was a reproduction, though. I worked at a living history farm museum. I had a kid that was climbing on stuff the whole tour in the farmhouse and trying to get behind the smith in the blacksmith shop during a demo. After the tour, when people are allowed to roam the grounds, I hear his mom screaming and look over to the barn, and this kid has climbed the fence into the field with our longhorn oxen and is trying to poke them with a stick. I walk over and calmly told him to get out of the field before our lazy oxen decide they've had enough, but this jack-off decides to look me in the eye and smack Ted on the ass with the stick like it's a riding crop. Ted, bless him, just kinda jumps a little and whips his head around with a WTF dude look on his face. But seeing as he's a longhorn, he just wipes this kid out with one of his horns when he turned his head. Kid goes flying into the dirt and is having a meltdown. Mom is freaking out. I'm like, dude, get the hell out of the pen before Ted actually gets mad. So this kid is crying and trying to climb the fence out of the field, and Bill, who has been watching this whole thing, waits until the kid is almost over the fence and walks up to him and nudges him in the ass with his nose and pushes him off the top of the fence. It was everything I could do to keep from laughing. Kid was fine, Ted was fine, but the kid and his mom were promptly kicked out of the museum. Their dad and little sister were allowed to stay because she was well behaved and was just enjoying petting the goats at the petting zoo. So since the kid had to leave but his sister didn't, there was a temper tantrum in the parking lot that could be heard all the way to the other side of the farm. But the oxen got some extra grain that night, so I guess they won in the end. I work in the backcountry ski guiding industry, working my way to becoming a lead guide. Guests are always trying to kill themselves, but here's one that stands out. Right now I mostly tail guide and pick people up when they fall, which is most of the time. One particularly deep day I'm sweeping a tree run and all of a sudden there's a man digging frantically in the snow towards a pair of legs. His wife had fallen head first down slope in a flattish area. When she lawn darted, the first half of her body was buried in the snow and only her legs and feet were visible. Her husband thought it was a good idea to stand on top where her face obviously was and start digging near the exposed part of her body. I guess in the moment he forgot about human anatomy and where her head might be. At this point I was maybe 3 minutes behind him, so she'd had her face under the surface for a while. I told him to stop and move, yelled, "Stop, you're on her face." I tried, added a couple expletives, but nothing. I finally had to grab him by the backpack and powerbomb him down the slope. I uncovered her face in under 10 seconds. She gasped for air, had a cry, and then proceeded to tear that man to pieces verbally. Not me, my best friend's tour guide on an island off the Australian coast. He saw one of the tour ignore the huge signs warning people not to go to the edge of the water. Predictably, the tourist gets hit by a huge wave, swept out to sea. I know it was the worst thing the tour guide ever saw because he and my best friend both went into the sea to rescue the tourist. And they both died. Funniest guy the first ever met. Miss him most days. The tourist who caused it all. Predictably, he survived. Pretty sure he doesn't feel too good about the whole thing. Jesus dude, sorry to hear that. This made national news, and it's tough to hear it straight from somebody who was so close to the victims. I'm in the middle of talking and someone's phone rings. Okay, that happens sometimes, and usually they just cancel the call or step outside. Nope, this guy answers the call and starts talking on the phone, only a few meters from where I'm standing. I think, oh, he'll just quickly explain he's busy and end the call. Nope. He starts a conversation. The rest of the group glare at him and I'm put in an awkward position because my workplace put a huge emphasis on politeness. So I suggest to him to continue his call in the hallway just outside the room we were in, to which he replied, "No, I'm fine here," and went back to his phone conversation. I'm doing my best to talk to the rest of the group, about 25 people, but he's so loud. Eventually this Chinese woman yells across the room at him, "Shut up, we want to listen to the lady, not you," which worked. But I just couldn't imagine the nerve to ruin everyone's experience like that, cause you're too selfish to talk on the phone outside. Also, the place I worked allowed photos but had a strict "no photos of the staff" rule for privacy reasons. I always explained this at the start, and 99% of people were cool. One day I had a particularly happy snapper who got right up in a staff member's face to take a photo, like I'm taking centimeters from his face to take a photo. The staffer was just some rando middle-aged white dude, so I'm not sure why the fascination, but he was livid. It's like I saw it happen in slow motion, so couldn't do anything to stop it. That guy was removed from the tour. I had a guest snorkeling try and grab the tail of a barracuda as he swam up behind it. Luckily I was able to hit the guest with a dive fin from the boat to stop him before he got a hold. If he had grabbed on, I'm sure he would have been ripped to pieces by that fish. Not a tour guide, but I guess you could say I work in the tourism industry. I work ground crew for a company that does helicopter tours. Number 1 rule for customers is don't walk under the tail boom, the rotor will kill you and it will hurt. It's unbelievable how many people have a death wish out there. People see the fastest way to the other side of the helicopter and don't stop to think, oh hey, that spinning blade may or may not slice my whole fucking head off, let's see how close we can get to it. I love helicopter tours. My dad worked for Bell, and I got a lot of check rides as a kid. My wife and I took our kid on her first heli ride, and some lady took her kid's hand and walked toward the rear of the bird to go to the other side. I yelled at her, "What the fuck do you think you're doing?" while pointing at the spinning tail rotor. Her husband got upset and puffed out his chest until the pilot told him almost word for word what you just wrote. Amazingly unobservant. I went on a helicopter ride once. They warn you repeatedly when you are getting on to be careful, but they didn't say anything getting off. I was so excited I did a little jump, heel click as I exited, and then remembered the giant blades right above my head. I shit myself remembering about it for weeks after, and then heard about a dad who put his daughter on his shoulders after getting off a helicopter and killed her. I felt so fucking bad for them. It's obviously so dumb, but in the moment sometimes you just don't think.